I'm Megan.
And this is
Cooking with the Bells.
All right. Well, so for today's drink, since we're out here early this morning prepping for a barbecue with our family, I thought we could use a hot cup of tea.
I would love that.
So, I have about 2.5 cups of water that's coming up to a simmer. And while that's coming up to a simmer, I have some 3-inch cinnamon sticks. And I'm just going to take 2 of those and put those in the water.
Oh, I can smell the cinnamon coming off that.
Yes, it's
It's like
good.
Christmas.
And then I have canned pear halves that are in pear juice with no added sugar. If you have fresh pears or frozen pears available, those also work really great. I just had neither one of those available to me this round. So I'm just going to pull out these pear halves and drop them in. And you want about 1 pear worth. And these were fairly small pears since they're canned, so I'm going to do 3 halves.
And so that's without the juice. You're just putting in the pear?
Yes, I'm just putting in the pear, and then I like to save the juice to use as like a simple syrup, since everyone likes their tea at a little different level of sweetness. And then I could just get a napkin.
Sure, of course.
Got covered in pear juice, didn't think about it. Windy today.
Ooh, excuse me. 2 seconds.
We have pinfuls flying around. And then the last thing I had, so I have about 2.5 cups of water that are just coming up to a simmer. And so I'm going to take 2.5 tablespoons of rooibos tea. And I'm using loose leaf. And rooibos tea is actually dried tea, obviously. It's dried leaves from a plant that mostly grows in Africa, southern part of Africa, if I remember correctly. So it's not your typical tea leaves, and it's actually very lowly caffeinated, which is, I think, really great, but it's also really refreshing, and it can actually help replace your electrolytes, I read.
Wow.
Which I find interesting.
Fun fact. First time I had rooibos tea. Kate had made some, and
This was 7 years ago, we've learned.
it was very horrible, and so I've been scared of it ever since. But she's promised me a good quality, that it's not going to taste the same, that was just a really bad experience with a really bad tea.
So whenever you get rooibos tea, one reason I recommend going through a very well-known tea company, such as, there's several online now. There's Dollar Tea, Tea Fort, Stash. Go through a well-known good tea brand.
Republic of Tea.
Yes. And the reason I say that is poorly done rooibos tea tastes worse than cough syrup.
Yes.
So, like, the bags of the not well-known brands that you see in the supermarket, do not recommend. So we have 2 3-inch cinnamon sticks, about 1 pear, and then 2.5 tablespoons of loose leaf tea. And I'm just going to let that simmer for 3 to 5 minutes. I'm just going to watch it till it gets to the color that I want. This brews very similarly to an herbal tea. So you don't want your water to get too hot. You'll kind of scorch it, which leaves those bitter tannins in your mouth. So we'll wait a few minutes and then we'll be back. And I'm quite literally just using my measuring spoon to stir it, just to keep everything good and moving. Boop, boop, boop. All right, and it's almost there. The water is between a boil and a simmer. Excuse me. And then the last thing I personally like to do when I make this tea is add just a splash of vanilla just to kind of lift it. But I don't want to do it too soon because then it just kind of cooks out, you know? So we're just going to add a hefty splash. Is probably close to a tablespoon, I'd say.
Yeah. Which I think both really appreciate a strong vanilla taste. So obviously that is up to your personal preference. You can use as little as a teaspoon or none at all.
Yeah. Very true. Just gonna wipe off this because we'll need it here in a little bit. Plus we might want to add some
Pear
juice. And then I'm gonna grab my cinnamon sticks and just put, this is just garnish, you don't have to do this. I'm just gonna take some cinnamon sticks and put in our glasses. I think it's pretty and we can use it as a stirring stick.
And how lovely would this be for like a Mother's Day brunch or, you know, any kind of like brunch or get together that you're gonna, honestly, probably like a morning or breakfast tea is when I would always like hot beverages.
Yeah, I agree. Right, so this is hot and I'm just gonna use my strainer and strain it straight into our glasses. You can obviously strain this into a tea kettle, or you can use an infuser so that you don't have loose tea in your pot. It's kind of already collected. You could put it all in a cheesecloth. It's kind of however you want to do that part of the process. Trying to not make a huge mess like I normally do. I'm not succeeding very well, but you know, it's okay. Just grab this other one and go ahead and finish making the mess so we can clean it up all at once. There we go.
Would you say that this tea is good served hot and cold, or is it mainly just a hot tea?
Rooibos is actually one of my favorite teas, like in general. If you make it hot and then, thank you, just shock it over ice, so like take it from its hot state, like I just did, pour it over ice, and then put it in a fresh glass of ice with half lemonade, half rooibos tea. I have not had a rooibos tea that I have not enjoyed that way.
That sounds really nice.
So good. All right, I'm gonna take a quick sip and see if I want some more. I want just like half a tablespoon syrup. Personally,
you know, I think I would like a little bit as well. It was great how it is, but I do
rooibos
like a little bit of this.
Yeah.
Sweet. You know, just go ahead and get more. I like pear a lot, so.
And rooibos tea is naturally sweeter when it's brewed than like your typical black and green teas. So I always recommend, especially if you've never had it before, to take a sip first and then adjust your sweetness how you want it.
And honestly, like, I think it's easier to see the profile of the flavor that way of anything that you're going to drink, whether it be a coffee or a tea. That way, you know, in the future you can play around with different ingredients, and instead of like cinnamon, you could add something different, you know.
I agree.
All
We
right.
ready for our cheers?
Cheers. Yay. Beautiful.
So,
so you're actually making the food recipe today on your own, and I'm watching because I've never
Oh my
made
gosh.
this. So what are we making today?
She says we're watching, but she's helping. So today we're making soda bread, which is bread that uses baking soda to rise instead of yeast. So it's really easy to throw together, throw in your oven. You don't have to worry about proving it and all of that kind of stuff. It's a much easier bread, and it's a rustic loaf. Has a good crust level on it. All of those things. It's one of my favorites to make.
Disclaimer, because obviously it's getting a little smoky behind us. We did say we were having a barbecue cookout today, so we are having something on our smoker currently. So We're
All
not
right.
smoking this.
We are not. This will just go straight into the oven just because temperature regulation when you're baking bread is very important. And we're not that good at keeping our smoker that hot. So you're going to want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have an oven that has a convection setting, go ahead and use that. That'll make this bread extra crusty on the outside, which is really good. So if you could start by pouring up 1 3/4 cup of milk.
1 3/4
Cup of milk, yes.
of milk. I was gonna do vinegar. That would be horrible. 1 3/4.
right.
Got it.
So we're making this dairy-free. As if you've watched us any amount, you know that Megan is dairy-free due to allergies. What you can do instead of this is you can actually just use 1 3/4 cup of buttermilk. And that's just use straight buttermilk. Since we're doing dairy-free, we're going to make our own plant version of buttermilk.
A little over. Okay. 2 seconds. Sorry, I'm not a great pourer. My eyesight's not super accurate.
3/4?
1 3/4.
Yeah.
3/4. Oh my gosh, you guys! I was doing.
She had it at a half, and I was like, "You're not."
No, it was at 1/3. I don't know why I thought 1/3 instead of 3/4. And I'm actually really good at math and fractions, but I'm like 3/4. Okay, 1/3 is what I heard.
We're gonna blame the baby brain.
She doesn't sleep very
The
well.
Yeah. The director hasn't wanted to sleep the past few nights, so you know.
1 3/4. 1.75. I know fractions. I really do.
Now,
Perfect.
I'm gonna
Okay.
hand you a tablespoon, and we're just gonna put 2 tablespoons of white distilled vinegar
Okay.
into our 1 3/4 cup of plant milk.
Oh, it's not opened. Oh gosh, this really threw me off. I'm just so shocked.
Welcome. And like I said, if you want to use dairy, if you're not dairy free, just straight 1 3/4 cup of buttermilk. This is just a good dairy free plant substitution.
I'm gonna 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna
Yes,
make sure
please.
I'm accurate with the vinegar. That could go horribly wrong.
It just makes the bread rise faster.
Oh goodness. Okay, 2 tablespoons into my 1 3/4 cups of milk.
Perfect. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 cups of bread flour, and then I'm going to do 2 cups of whole wheat flour. If you wouldn't mind getting the whole wheat bag open
Not
for
at
me.
all. We should have had a caffeinated tea today, apparently.
Yeah. You know, I was thinking light, refreshing, kind of uplift our spirits.
Yeah.
But apparently that was the wrong call today. Sounds like we're making a second bar coffee today, let me tell you. All right. And I know I don't actually measure my flour correctly, but this is the way that has always worked for me for this bread, so don't judge me. So it's 2 cups of bread flour. You can use all-purpose flour if you don't want to go out and buy bread flour. It just gives a little more structure to the bread. So if you use all-purpose flour, your bread's going to be a lot softer and not have as much gluten built up in it. So that is personal preference. I prefer the bread flour. I prefer the texture. It's my preferred way. But I also know not everyone wants to go buy a new flour to try a bread recipe.
Well, what about the whole wheat? Is there a reason why we're using that instead of an all-purpose?
One, it tastes good.
That's important.
It tastes good, and then I use whole wheat. Oh gosh, I'm having a brain fart.
It's okay. You obviously did earlier.
So it's, 1, it tastes good, and 2, the reason with using bread flour, the whole wheat helps actually cut the higher protein count that's in bread flour. So you could do like half bread flour, half all-purpose flour if you want, but it is going to taste different because whole wheat flour has a very specific taste to it. So I would recommend getting whole wheat flour. And tip on whole wheat flour, if you need it to last a long time, because like this is the only bread recipe you make with it and you don't make it very often or anything like that, it stores really well in your freezer and can be good for like, I want to say it was like up to a year. Just because whole wheat flour is more volatile than all-purpose. I do not know the reason behind that. I was just told that by a bread baker about 7 years ago and went, all right, sure.
One thing to know about Kate is she has made a lot of breads. She's made a lot of recipes. She is, I would say, an expert, or at least an expert in our family on doughs and breads and that kind of
It's my favorite thing. I find it very therapeutic. Megan's the cake and cookie person, though. Don't let her fool you.
I do love sweets.
Okay, so I just mix those two flours together with my hand, and I just kind of use a claw, whisk it, and then now, if you could give me a tablespoon of baking soda, please, ma'am.
Of course, of course. There, it's beardly level.
Perfect. And then you can also put between a teaspoon and half a tablespoon of salt in here if you want. I just don't. It's usually I don't have the salt handy, and I realize after my hands are gross, and I go, it'll be okay. But salt, unlike with a yeasted dough, salt is not going to inhibit this bread from rising. So, personal taste. And then I'm just going to make our homemade plant buttermilk concoction. And I'm just going to slowly, I'm going to pour about half in here. And then just using that claw hand, mix it together. Since we're using standard measurements instead of weighing out our flour and using milliliters, which are slightly more exact, supposedly, I've been told. You may or may not need exactly the entire amount of your liquid.
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
I know we are obviously hand kneading or mixing it up and that sort of thing. Is this one that you could convert to using like a dough hook in a mixer, or should you just use your hand?
You could use a dough hook. I honestly recommend using your hand because you could learn how to fill the dough to be like, oh, I need a little more liquid today. I need a little less. Because how much liquid you need is actually going to depend on humidity levels, because that'll change how much moisture is in your flour based on your environment, which I know sounds weird, but...
And so, also a question, would you say that this is more therapeutic to do it this way than putting it in your...
Yes. And one thing about this is once I get this brought together, we're actually immediately going to, like, put it on the tray and get it in the oven, just because we have that baking soda vinegar reaction happening. So it's not a dough that I'm going to sit here and knead for 10 minutes. I'm just getting it super mixed together. Yeah. You don't have to, like, sit here and just, like, knead and knead and knead. If it was that, I would put it in my mixer and then I just knead, like, the last 3 minutes so I don't over knead it.
So this isn't a dough that has to, like, sit for hours and rise and that kind of thing.
This bread's going to be done in, like, an hour.
Okay.
Start to finish. And then, let's see. I have a little more flour in the bottom. However, my dough's really sticky, so I'm just kind of pushing it into the flour.
Does elevation change anything about the dough and rising and that?
Not this particular dough, because it doesn't have butter in it. In rich doughs and sometimes yeasted dough, depending on the environment, will change. And it's just because, like, the higher you get, melting point actually changes a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's what actually kind of causes issues. All right, so I kept kneading it. And now we have a slightly sticky, like, it's slightly sticky, but it's not like my hand that was not covered in milk. You can see it's not really sticking to it. And that's exactly what we want. So would you mind grabbing our baking sheet for me?
Not at all. We are in the tiny woods of East Texas on a Saturday morning, and this is obviously a little loud here.
Yeah. The gardening is happening. All of our neighbors are getting all their land ready to start getting the seeds in the ground. So I'm just forming this into a rough dough ball. And then would you take just a little bit of whole wheat flour and sprinkle it on the foil. You can also use parchment. You don't have to line your baking sheet. We just do this for easier cleanup. And then I'm actually using the flour to instead of a nonstick spray. So it helps it from sticking. And then I'm just going to set it on there. And then I'm going to do something that is going to feel completely weird and foreign for bread, but it's what you want to do for soda bread because of the way it rises. I'm going to cut it. I'm right-handed, so this is awkward. And I mean, I'm cutting it. I probably don't even have half an inch left at the bottom. You're almost cutting this all the way through. And then I'm going to cut it the opposite direction, so I've just made a big X. And I pretty much just do like a straight push until I get resistance from the bottom of the pan. And then I'm just going to kind of... I make sure my ends are pinched together so it stays one loaf, and then you just want that opened. And that's going to keep your bread from, like, ripping in random places. It gives the steam a place to escape so that it doesn't, like, rip your bread open.
Wow.
So this is going to go in our 400-degree oven, and it'll be in there between 45 minutes and an hour, just depending on how much.
All right.
And then we'll
See you then.
be back.
It's been about an hour.
Yeah. Oven at 400, about an hour, and we already cut a slice for us to try, but just so you can like hear it, I just want to like cut a little piece. Like you can hear that crust, right? It's so good. I just wanted you to hear that.
Beautiful with some olive oil, balsamic vinegar, or just like some butter.
I was gonna say my mom's favorite thing to do, because you should really, once your loaves come out, you should let them sit for about 30 minutes. This is fresh out of the oven because I never wait. And then you just put a pat of butter on this and eat that. Drizzle of honey. Oh. Good fresh bread. Like, because I know y'all can hear us crunching. Like I said, this is an artisan type loaf, and it does have, and is supposed to have a very thick crust on it. Just to be clear, because I know some people don't like a thick, crusty bread, and that's okay.
What do you think this should be served with? Just olive oil and butter, or what kind of dishes would you serve it with?
Anything. I actually use this a lot for sandwich bread, personally, because it's really cheap to make once you have your flours, and it's super easy. So I'll use it as sandwich bread because I really like a good crust.
Yeah.
But you could also use it with, I mean, anything you would have a roll or cornbread or a slice of toast with, you could replace it with this if you wanted to. It is a fairly neutral flavored bread. Like, it's not a fruit-filled bread, although you can make it fruit-filled.
I think this is perfect with, like, a good beef stew myself, or any kind of soup, really.
I love it with soup just because the thick crust will, like, hold up to dunking instead of getting super soggy.
It's true.
But, yeah, I think that's it for this episode. Pretty quick and easy overall. It's just...
Definitely.
You need your oven for an hour, but other than that, it's like 5 minutes in the oven, walk away.
Beautiful. So, and look how nice that looks.
I know, it's such a looker, like, so pretty. Well, like always, if you enjoyed this video, if you maybe learned something, or if you just had a good time, enjoyed watching, hit the like button down below. It helps us out a ton and we really appreciate it.
And if you want to see more from us, go ahead and consider hitting that subscribe button. If you already are a subscriber to our channel, we appreciate you. We thank you so much for supporting us. And if you want to see this recipe in all the measurements listed out in printable view. The link below will take you directly to our website, so you can see that, see some more recipes, get the recipe for the drink we made.
Everything. And I think we'll see you next time. Bye.